Danielle, thank you for being available to talk to us today. So tell us a little bit about what you do in the World Bank.
Thank you very much, Habiba. First, it's a real pleasure to be here. I am Spanish and I work for the World Bank in the Latin American Caribbean region. I'm working on adaptation to climate change projects. So basically helping countries adapt to the expected changes in climate change that they are suffering nowadays in the different ecosystems, regions of the countries.
Okay. As you know, yesterday you spent quite a bit of time interacting with the development marketplace, which is going on over there. And we have 100 finalists, or project finalists that are here with us this week. I understand you've been walking around there. Are there some ideas that you saw that you think are really innovative in terms of addressing the risks from climate change?
Definitely. There is a wealth of ideas out there. The first thing I would pick up from them is, I would say, the enthusiasm of the people, all the willingness to be innovative, to do something out of the box. And then, of course, the idea of having a limited fund to make a proposal, a minimum proposal, it's creating this willingness to find something new, to find something different. And of course, I have seen a lot, especially in working with communities, in trying to bring together those voices of indigenous peoples. There is a lot out there regarding those issues. Also, I've seen some nice, interesting things on saving the glaciers or using desalination technologies with sun power, electricity. So yes, there is a wealth of ideas there that we can definitely feed on to go on our work.
And what do you think is the biggest risk from climate change to many of the communities that you see down there?
Well, the ultimate risk of climate change is very likely going to be water or water shortages, all these water issues. So the increase in temperatures is more likely going to disrupt the water cycle, and so there are going to be problems of water availability, water regulation with the loss of glaciers, with the loss of critical ecosystems. There's going to be less water in the dry seasons. There's going to be less rain or more consecutive periods of dry days. So that's going to be a real challenge that is going to have to make all the stakeholders sit together and discuss how they're going to overcome those issues.
And you were also involved in some of the knowledge sharing dialogues that were going on yesterday that were set up for the finalists. Were there any ideas that were brought in as a collective that you think is worth sharing with the rest of the people around the world through this webcast?
Yes, particularly they talked a lot about using ancient knowledge, or using the knowledge of communities and the knowledge that has been gathered for the past centuries, that is very useful and is hands on the ground. So that's a good idea that sometimes we tend to overlook, and it's very important that we give voice to those people who already are in the area and who know what everything is about. So that's an important message that I think I'm taking home.
Mm-hmm. And one of the ideas I heard is that we have different sorts of knowledge. So there's scientific and formal knowledge. There's also the indigenous knowledge that you talked about. There's traditional knowledge in many communities as well. So really bringing all that knowledge together and addressing the risks and increasing risks of climate change was something that came out as a general theme. And so your idea about that knowledge was really important. So you've been to the dialogues, you've seen many of the innovative ideas, you work in the World Bank in an interesting and a fairly big region. What is it that you've learned from there that you think should really be incorporated perhaps in your work or work of colleagues, including myself and so on?
Yeah, many ideas I picked up, but probably working more in the interaction, working more in the involvement of all stakeholders, working more on being sure and making sure that you're getting to the people you want to work with and you're getting to the last family and to the last person, and so really getting all the groups involved in the discussion. That's probably the most important thing. More than technologically, it's more of a social and cultural interrelationship issue.
Okay, and what do you think is the biggest challenge for all of us in looking at the adaptation to climate change?
Probably a big challenge, keeping in line with this thought, is being able to understand all the local knowledge, to understand all the indigenous people's capabilities, and trying to project that into a changing future. which is probably the component that is missing, because traditionally the weather has been more or less stable, but we now know that it's going to change. So that's the challenge, is to be in that interface between what is known and what has been happening till now, and to project it into a changing future.
Thank you very much for being available and talking, and I'm sure you interacted with them in Spanish and talking to us in English here. Obviously, the indigenous people knowledge window is extremely important, and thank you for talking to us.
Thanks to you, Javier.
Every visitor who comes to an outer island in Kiribati is privileged to get a tour of the local land. During my tour of Korea Island, I couldn't help but feel slightly sad, knowing this island, like the country of Kiribati, may become unlivable within 50 years. Kiribati, a nation of 33 coral atolls and 107,000 people, is grappling with an entirely new set of questions. We in the global north envision Kiribati's end as catastrophic, apocalyptic tides overrunning islands in an instant. But in reality, Kiribati's devastation will happen slowly, especially on outer islands, as the Kiribati landscape and livelihood are eroded by climate change. Salt water contaminates wells and waves overrun seawalls, hampering islanders' efforts in agriculture. Torote is witness to the saltwater devastation on the island of Marianne. Most of his family's babai pits have ceased to produce the traditional tuber.
No, it's mainly coming over.
Right now.
Because when it comes over, then it makes the water blackish.
His father Uriam tells of the trouble with rising temperatures.
Can we remain nationals of Kiribati when we are living in Australia? What would be our citizenship? Do we still have sovereignty in Kiribati when there is no longer the country of Kiribati? These are issues which I think at this point in time nobody is yet ready to address that.
Before questions like this are answered, Kiribati will need a solution for current problems. Tare, for example, is experiencing problems harvesting copra, the dried meat of coconuts that is the sole income for many families. The 4-day curing process garners roughly $26 for one sack of copra.
Now it's very hard to get coconuts, okay? Because of the heat. They dry up the coconuts up in the tree, and it's very hard to fall.
But at the end of the day, we've got to be very realistic as to the level of affluence we can accumulate without damaging the rest. I think there has to come a time, since this is enough, I'm quite comfortable, I will be all right until the end of my life, rather than continue to accumulate wealth at a cost to other people in the south and pay the ultimate price.
Hi, this is Kirsten Spainhauer with the Development Marketplace, and we're on the floor of the Atrium, all abuzz with lots of excitement, and I'm here interviewing Anne Koch from Santa Clara University. So, Anne, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is special about the DM?
Well, the overriding positive is the opportunity to bring people together who have common interests, but who are working in so many different places. So the opportunity to share ideas, learn from one another, I think that's a great strength of the marketplace.
And as an external partner, I'm wondering, how do you think we can share knowledge effectively and rapidly to spur innovative thinking?
Some of it is related to using technology, the social media. Some of it, I think, is continuing to leverage with the partners who bring their own particular skills. So using the partners to kind of fill in places that augment the good work that the Development Marketplace does and that the World Bank Institute does. So I think in collaboration, the sort of larger footprint of the DM and the Institute working with the particular strengths, the specialized niche strengths of the partners can really strengthen the collaboration.
And so you've also been coming to the Development Marketplace for a number of years. I'm wondering, what do you think is special about this year's event?
I think in some ways I feel that it's maybe a richer, broader, deeper kind of event, even though it still remains segmented as it has. But everything about it this year seems more, more sensitive, maybe. The displays, the music, and perhaps the opportunity to work with the knowledge sharing that's going on in and around the marketplace. So it's become a bigger event than just what we see on the floor. And I think that continued growth around the core of the floor is noteworthy.
Well, thanks so much, Anne. I think that's all we have from the floor at the moment.
Or just look at you.
Ed, Cameron, thank you so much for being here. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I've spent a number of years working on climate change, approximately 14 years. I started working with municipalities within the European Union and subsequently moved on to work with the community of small island states. I worked particularly with the Maldives, and during my time with the Maldives I was senior advisor on climate change to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it was my job to construct a strategy for global negotiations for the Maldives while also working on issues of public diplomacy. And principally what we were trying to do was to inject a sense of urgency and ambition into the work we do globally on climate change, because we felt that the conversation on climate change was too much focused on ecosystems and natural systems and not focused enough on human and social systems. So what we wanted to try to do was to make sure that people were aware of the impacts climate change have today on human beings, on their jobs, on their homes, on their human rights and on their lives, and to make sure that whatever policy interventions we design tackle those issues.
So in a way you were instrumental in actually bringing the focus of Maldives and its plight from climate change to the attention of the rest of the world, including the people watching today.
I would say that the small island communities themselves have been instrumental. I have had the great privilege of working with them, but they have long regarded as being the conscience of the convention, because they bring that moral and social justice dimension to the negotiations, and they remind us that climate change is not about environment, it's not about parts per million of CO2 equivalent, it's about human beings, their jobs, their homes and their lives.
Okay, so many of the people around the world have heard about, say, what's happening under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. They've also heard of Copenhagen and so on. So there tends to be a focus on the negotiations. But how relevant is that to what's happening, say, on the ground in Maldives?
The negotiations are hugely important because they set the context within which we all work. And I think one of the great lessons that I've learned from this development marketplace is to need to make sure that we integrate what happens at the project level, within households, within communities, with what happens at the global level. Because the policy building blocks that are established in Copenhagen, whether it's on mitigation or adaptation or finance or technology, all of those policies filter down to the local and even the household level. So one of the messages coming from this development marketplace is that there's a great need for more financial resources to scale up these projects. Those financial resources will be available or not available depending on what agreement we reach in Copenhagen. There's a great need for access to technology. Technology will be made available to people depending on how negotiations in Copenhagen pan out. There's a great need to tackle greenhouse gas emissions and to stabilize emissions, because what we adapt to in our adaptation strategies are greatly dependent on what type of CO2 equivalent and what type of emissions trajectory we have in the long term. So everything we're discussing at the Copenhagen summit filters right down to the household level, and there's got to be greater integration, and it's hugely important.
So I'm really glad to see there's an international, national and then local connection. Here, as you know, we've got social entrepreneurs and people with small ideas and so on, bringing that to the attention of the rest of the world. Given the challenges that you see for finance and so on, what have you seen out there, perhaps not so technologically oriented, but other orientation that you think is really innovative and is helping solve some of the adaptation issues?
I would say there are three issues that I picked up on. The first is the notion that people are not only victims of climate change impacts, but they are agents of change themselves. And there are small steps that they can take, if properly prompted, that can make a huge difference to their ability to adapt. The second thing that I've seen is the need to support autonomous adaptation with improved planning. And improved planning means working across scales of governance. So leaving a municipality to work in isolation without getting greater support from a provincial level, a national level, an international level or a global level is a huge mistake, because it does not provide the necessary support that will enable us to scale up these projects. And the third aspect, I think, is one of improving stakeholder participation. All of the successful projects that we see here are ones that involve giving voice to vulnerable populations and giving them ownership of their own trajectory, of their own choices, of their own adaptation plans. And I think that's the greatest innovation. Innovation in process, innovation in participation, and making sure that we're properly connected across all scales of governance.
I'm very impressed that you picked up on the innovation on process, because most of the time people talk about innovation on technologies. And that, to me, I agree with you entirely, is an extremely important component. My final question, you've been here for last 2 years in the World Bank, and I've seen you around. What is it that we should learn from there and actually apply to our work?
The first thing we've got to learn, I think, is always to make sure that the voices of the vulnerable are incorporated into the work that we do, that vulnerable populations are not always included in the planning of national adaptation strategies or of poverty reduction strategies, and we as a World Bank have a great power to convene vulnerable populations and make sure that their voices are heard. I think we've also got to make sure that whatever policies we design, whatever interventions we are responsible for ourselves, include a social dimension and don't only look at ecosystems, but look at the full range of socio-ecological interactions. And I think if we do that, we can be a very progressive force in dealing with climate change.
Thank you, Ed, and
Pleasure.
thank you for your passion and enthusiasm, and I hope that we'll bring in the vulnerable communities and have them participate in some of these discussions as well. Thank you.
Oh, hi. My name is John Garrison. I work for the World Bank Civil Society team, and I'm going to be interviewing a colleague of mine from Colombia, who's here at the Development Marketplace with a very interesting project. And I'm going to interview him now in Spanish, and he'll be able to explain to you what the project that they're involved with to address climate change. Buenos días. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Su nombre, por favor?
Mi nombre es Pablo Hernán Jamioy. Soy Camtra, que es una comunidad indígena del departamento de Putumayo, Colombia. Mi proyecto consiste en utilizar el conocimiento tradicional de 5 pueblos indígenas en el Putumayo y también tecnologías de sistemas de información geográfica y sensores remotos para hacer 5 planes de ordenamiento ambiental con los cuales se va a lograr conservar bosque nativo, lugares de nacimientos del río Putumayo, río Caquetá, que son efluentes del río Amazonas, también los lugares donde las comunidades hacen sus prácticas rituales tradicionales también los lugares de caza, de pesca y los lugares donde se construyen las viviendas y en donde se cultivan los alimentos propios de cada comunidad. Esto para también formular estrategias que ayuden a gestionar apoyos de otros entes externos y poder fortalecer nuestra cultura y también nuestra capacidad de adaptación al cambio del clima que está generando desaparición de algunas especies, de flora y fauna, hay riesgos sobre los humedales. Entonces es utilizar nuestros conocimientos para fortalecernos y proteger esas áreas haciendo un mejor uso y manejo de los recursos que ahí están.
Muy bueno, sí, parece muy interesante, muy estratégico. ¿Con cuántas poblaciones indígenas o grupos indígenas estás trabajando actualmente?
La organización que represento con mi compañero que también está en el stand representa a 14 pueblos indígenas de los 102 que hay en Colombia. En el Putumayo una población aproximada de entre 25.000 y 30.000 indígenas.
Bueno. ¿Y cuáles las acciones específicas que van a hacer en el proyecto?
Ya. Vamos a hacer partir de los ritos de la comunidad para socializar este proyecto. También vamos a hacer reuniones comunitarias para comprometer actores que son profesionales y líderes que se van a vincular al proceso. Luego vamos a determinar los límites de acuerdo al conocimiento ancestral del territorio, las categorías de zonificación, los usos y manejos que se le dan. Luego se hace un levantamiento cartográfico y finalmente ese levantamiento se hace una zonificación de las áreas a proteger y las áreas que se pueden utilizar. Y finalmente se genera un documento. Ese documento se da a conocer a la comunidad, se lo aprueba, pero también se da a conocer a otras organizaciones de afuera y se capacita a un grupo para que pueda enseñarlo, darlo a conocer internamente, pero también pueda formular proyectos para gestionar recursos y fortalecer las acciones que quedan en ese plan.
Bueno, es la primera vez que viene a Washington y ¿cómo le parece?
Me ha parecido muy bonito, hay un cambio bastante diferente a lo que uno usualmente está acostumbrado a mirar.
Bueno, ¿y cuántos días vas a quedar acá?
Nosotros estamos hasta el 15, el domingo, 15 de noviembre.
Bien. Mucho gusto entonces, y buena suerte en la competencia acá. Hasta luego.
Guangxi Province in southern China. Until recently, farmers here burned wood for cooking and heating. Now they're leading a sustainable energy revolution. Thanks to some help from a government project supported by IFAD, a UN agency working to adapt technology to the needs of poor rural people, farmers like CA Oishun are now capturing methane from animal droppings and human waste and using it to produce their own fuel.
It all flows into a biogas digester, a large tank buried underground. The waste comes in here, and as it ferments inside, the gas builds up and travels back out through this tube. It takes the gas into the house where we use it to cook.
In capturing and using methane for cooking and lighting, CA not only has an abundant supply of inexpensive fuel, but he's reducing its global warming effect. At the same time as waste decomposes inside CA's new biogas digester, he's left with another fuel, an organic fertilizer high in nitrogen.
Since supplying the fertilizer to my cucumber plants, they've grown much bigger than before when I use chemicals. They even taste better.
Although biogas technology has been available in China for decades, a growing income gap between city dwellers and farmers has fueled its recent revival. In the last 2 decades, 200 million rural people have moved to China's cities. One of the ways the central government is trying to make rural life more appealing is by offering farmers cash incentives to build biogas digesters so that they can produce their own fuel cheaply. Since Leo Shun Sayan's family began producing biogas on their farm, she no longer spends 3 hours a day collecting wood for cooking. Instead, she's taken training that's helped her make improvements to the family's tea farm, which now earns more money. Thousands of farmers across the province have done the same, contributing to a drop in rural poverty, according to IFAD.
This project started in 2001, and 3 years later we could see that overall the households have moved up from poverty to low income and even out of poverty. After 3 years we observed already that about 10% had already moved on. So about 20,000 households.
Thanks to government financial incentives and education tours like this one supported by IFAD, there are now 3 million biogas tanks in operation across Guangxi, making the province the largest producer of biogas in China, if not the world. As each one routes animal and human waste into biogas digesters, they not only prevent vast amounts of methane from escaping into the atmosphere, but an estimated 8 million tons of standard coal and 13 million tons of firewood from being burned each year, making Guangxi one of the greenest provinces in China.
Hi, today joining us here is Helen Marquard. She works with something called the Seed Initiative, and she's going to try to tell us a little bit about herself. First, Helen, if that's okay, and then also tell us what you're doing in Washington, D.C.
Fine. Thank you very much indeed, Habiba. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is my first time at the Development Marketplace, and it's of particular interest because there are parallels between what the Development Marketplace does and what Seed does. There are differences, but let me dwell on the parallels first. The Seed Initiative was started about 5 years ago by IUCN, UNEP and UNDP with the idea of promoting social and environmental entrepreneurs in developing countries. And the way that we do that is to look for really promising startup, innovative partnerships where the business model incorporates a social and environmental aspect right at the outset. So these are real triple bottom line enterprises. We identify them through a competition, and there's one of the parallels. And indeed, yesterday we just announced the gold winners for our 2009 competition, so I hope there's something of interest for you there. Rather than a cash award, what we do is to work with each winner to find out what their priority needs are, and then Seed helps to provide those needs in the form of services up to a value of about $25,000. That means that each winner gets an absolutely tailored package of capacity building, and that has proved to be extremely useful. It's not the only aspect, however, because what else we do is to try to network them and to profile them in country. So we give the awards in country, and we couple that with a capacity building workshop. We couple it with a Seed event where we'll try to get some high-level speakers and interested organizations so that the network can start to grow. Because, as you well know, if you're a startup, you don't have very much time and really not very much opportunity to start forging connections to bigger organizations that could be able to help. Another aspect which I mention now because I think we'll come on to it later, is that SEED is looking not only to help these individual entrepreneurs, but really to derive the lessons that are being learned and to take those to the policy world, as well as developing tools to help each entrepreneur to develop, but also make those tools available to the broader community of entrepreneurs.
So many of the aspects that you've mentioned, like the networking, the startup aspect, the capacity building, is something that the development marketplace is focusing on just down there. So this is something that's extremely important component of any of the combination of the environment and the development agenda. And I hope you do actually have a chance to go and see them. But I would also request maybe the people sitting out there watching this to in fact join in this gathering, join in this networking through writing a blog, perhaps, or sending a Twitter message. Helen, I understand you've been here only for half an hour, so I don't know how much chance you've had of looking at those booths. We caught you very early, but just briefly, we have just tell us what was your impression of what you saw out there, or an idea that you saw that was really innovative.
My first impression is very similar to my impression with the SEED winners, that you have a group of people here who are absolutely committed to making a difference, to making things better, both socially and then environmentally. And they come with a commitment and an energy which is absolutely inspiring. So that's my first impression. I was very, very pleased to see that one of the finalists for the marketplace this year is from Bolivia, and indeed the person I've spoken to is very closely connected to one of our first winners from the same community in Cochabamba in Bolivia. So there was very nice parallel indeed.
So in a way, we're still a very small world. And I hope you do actually have a pleasant visit and talk to more people. And as you know, the development marketplace works through partnerships with other organizations. So it's been wonderful meeting you, and I hope that we do get a chance to become and work as partners down in the future and push these bottom-up ideas.
We would welcome
Helen.
that. Thank you very much indeed, Habiba.
مبروك وعريسنا مبروك وعروسة مبروك وعريسنا مبروك وعروسة زولي ملتاسا اكي باركيروا مبروك وعريسنا مبروك وعروسة مبروك وعريسنا مبروك وعروسة.
Oh, hi. Yes, we're here now with Visipura from Nepal, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his organization and civil society in Nepal, and also about his impressions of coming to Washington for this competition.
I'm Visipura from Forest Action Nepal. Forest Action Nepal is a professional organization working in the field of livelihoods, democracy, and environment. It basically works in research, action research, and development intervention as well. The role of civil society organization in Nepal is very crucial, as due to conflict during 10-12 years, government existence in the remote rural areas was minimal, where civil society organization catered basic services to the people and complement government in the conflict and crucial situation. And participating in development marketplace is an exciting experience for me, as it is an opportunity for getting exposure and establishing networking with the international and global organizations, especially civil society organizations working in the field of climate change and environment. And it is also a forum for learning and sharing ideas and innovations, especially in climate change and climate adaptation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Now, what's your impression of coming to Washington? Is this the first time you've been, and what do you think of this competition?
Yeah, in Washington, it's my first time, and the city is very beautiful, and being here in World Bank and interacting with people from around the world, and even from the World Bank and other international organizations was quite exciting and useful, fruitful, I think.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. And good luck with the competition. Yeah. Now I have another colleague here, Lizelle, from Belize, is going to tell us a little bit about her work and also civil society in Belize.
Yeah, I work for Yashe Conservation Trust. It's an NGO that focuses on protected areas management, sustainable land use, community outreach and livelihoods. And we submitted a project to the DM, and we were one of the 100 finalists, which we're excited about.
Yeah, what's the Belize civil society like these days? Has it evolved in the last few years, and especially the environmental movement there?
Well, I think out of all the sectors in civil society, the environmental sector is the most active. We have a network, PAMO, the Association of Protected Areas Management Organization, that represents the management organizations of protected areas that co-manage land along with the Forest Department. And we're a very well-organized group and vocal and very much involved in promoting policy.
And what's your impression of the development marketplace? Is this the first time you're participating in this competition?
Yes, it is the first time. And it's a very interesting approach to the selection of who will be funded. What this process offers is an opportunity to interact with other finalists and get ideas, because all of us seem to be dealing with similar issues, and perhaps we can adapt their ideas to our needs. So it does provide that opportunity.
Great. Well, Lizelle, thanks a lot, and good luck with the competition. Yeah, bye.
I'll show you. I had the wall here initially, and so that was destroyed by the very high tides in 2005. And I built this quite some time back, over the years. That was destroyed, so I rebuilt it.
Anote Tong is obsessed with the sea. He's the man in charge of a vanishing nation. The seas that have supported life here for 4,000 years are rising because of global climate change. It's Tong's job as president of the country to decide what to do.
For quite some time I did not sleep because I had no solution to a problem that nobody has a solution to. What happens to us as a people in the future? Do we disappear as a culture? And so these are the issues that keep me awake.
Tong must decide the fate of his people. Should they stay and fight or evacuate their island home? Tong's nation is called Kiribati, 33 atoll islands stretching across the Pacific Ocean, 7 hours flight from Australia, 10 hours from the United States. Strips of land on the edge of the world so low that from the water they seem to vanish.
In Kiribati, it's very hard to see the next island. 10 kilometers out or even 15 kilometers out, you can no longer see land. So how we located is we use the reflection from the clouds. So that's how we navigate. Over there is Marianne, the next most immediate, which is my island. So that's where I go fishing when I go trolling.
At his home on the island of Tarawa, the country's capital, Tong admits he has little time to fish these days. Since elected president in 2003, he spent much of his time sounding the alarm that his country is disappearing.
Already we have whole villages being washed out. There is no running away from the reality that the sea is rising. There is no running away from that reality.
These images shot during a storm in 2005 are an example of what Tong and his people are fighting against. As greenhouse gases warm the planet, water expands, waves grow stronger, and seas rise higher, as much as 2 meters by the end of the century, says one study from the University of Colorado. For the country's 108,000 residents who live on narrow strips of land just 2 meters above sea level, it's a trend that spells disaster.
We had one single large island. I think it might be possible to put seawalls around it, but it's virtually an impossibility given the geography, structure, and the scatteredness of our islands. And so where does that leave us? We have to face the reality of it. And the reality seems to be that we have to relocate. The question is, how do we relocate?
In 2008, Tong took his dilemma to the United Nations.
Mr. President, on climate change, while the international community continues to point fingers at each other regarding responsibility for and leadership on this issue, our people continue to experience the impact of climate change and sea level rise. Here we were confronted with a number of countries wanting to achieve more economic growth and arguing the case that, of course, they must not be tied down to these stringent obligations. To me, it's offensive, it's insulting, because it's so insensitive about the fate of a people.
The people of Kiribati arrived on these islands 4,000 years ago, one of the last stops in humanity's migration out of Africa. The islands they settled stretched over an expanse of ocean the size of India. It's here at the southern tip that fishermen like 23-year-old Roberto Chavez feel the threat of global climate change most. Roberto says seawater has begun seeping into the water table, giving the well water his mother draws each day a salty taste. The frequency and size of his catch has also become less predictable. And then there's his 83-year-old father, Yobate. He's declared war against the rising tide, building a seawall, and then standing guard over it each evening.
The temperatures are getting hotter, and there's a change in the level of the sea. It's getting higher. These changes are affecting the food we grow. Before, our coconuts were big, but now they're as small as our fists.
Coconuts are among Kiribati's chief exports. With fewer to sell, many like Roberto are finding it harder to earn a living. Even so, Tong resists the idea of moving people off the islands en masse, creating a nation of climate change refugees.
This is the last thing that I want to put forward as an option for our people, because having lost our homeland, having lost our cultural identity, I don't think we want to lose our dignity.
Tong needs to address immediate problems being created by climate change, like poverty and shrinking food supplies. So while he considers how best to move people off the island, he plans to develop the country's economy.
The idea is to encourage the development of the islands. There are people with more time to do it. We just need to be able to provide them with the opportunity, the skill, and whatever equipment they need.
But convincing development organizations to invest in a country that won't be around in 50 years is not easy. For the first time, the UN agency specializing in agricultural development, IFAD, sends a team to assess the situation on Kiribati's most remote southern island, Arore.
We would like to understand some of the challenges that you face with the environment And is there any change that people have noticed in weather, in the sea?
Over the last few years, we've seen extreme changes in the environment. There has been a lot of damage to trees. Wells are salty. There is erosion along the coastline. And because we've had such little rain over the last few years, our crops are dying. And there is no fruit on the trees. These are things we can't fix ourselves.
If we think of what the President of the country is saying, that the whole survival of the islands over the next 50 years is in question. A challenge that we face is what happens in the course of this 50 years. We've heard from the communities themselves that they're struggling to feed themselves. So how do we respond to this is an enormous challenge.
Hartman's group helps islanders develop a plan, one that tackles some of their most immediate problems, like the salination of drinking water, but also breaks new ground for those living on the front lines of climate change.
Agricultural research, for instance, could contribute to improving soil fertility. Agricultural research could also contribute to developing crop varieties that they can grow in these areas that may increase productivity, so they move from subsistence to having just a little bit of surplus that they can sell for income generation. So food security is a critical issue here.
This agricultural research center has been set up to identify food crop varieties able to tolerate rising temperatures and grow in salty water. Tong hopes to turn islands like Arore into centers for food production, growing crops that could help feed populations on other islands where the impact of climate change is advancing much more quickly. But these are just temporary measures. Tong says the real challenge is to make those countries contributing to climate change take responsibility for its effects.
We will be victims regardless of what happens. And we're just the ones on the front line now. And I think the point is, if nothing is done, then other countries and other people will be next on the front line. When do we start to sacrifice our standards of living for the sake of the future of this planet? The biggest challenge that I want to throw is, what are you going to do about the people that have become victims? This represents the single biggest moral challenge to humankind. And if it doesn't respond to this, then there is no credibility to anything.
On the edge of the world, a nation's people wait. In just a few decades, they may have to leave these islands for good. And what was, 4,000 years ago, the end of humanity's global migration could see the start of its retreat.
I'm Kirsten Spainhauer, and I'm joined by Kristen with Ashoka. He's from a sister organization, much like the Development Marketplace, and I have him here to tell us a little bit about Ashoka and the difference between the two.
Sure. Well, Ashoka is an organization that started in the 80s by electing social entrepreneurs around the world. We've grown it over almost 30 years to have about 2,500 fellows operating in all different issue areas. And we've also grown to have an online platform, changemakers.com. We have initiatives like Youth Venture that supports young folks that are trying to move into social entrepreneurship as well.
Okay. And Ashoka is a really dynamic institution that uses a lot of social media as well. This is our sort of maiden voyage doing a lot of social media networking. And so I also wanted to take the opportunity to direct people to our blog as well. Folks can go on to the blog at www.dm.
Let's get this right.
Yeah, let's get this right, exactly. So www.blogs.worldbank.org/DMblog. And we're also doing some tweets on the website as well. So we're going to be also, again, collaborating with Ashoka and tapping into their social media expertise. Maybe you can tell me, Will, how you all lead your social media program and how that helps to support your agenda.
Sure. Well, social media became really important to us because we're so focused on individuals. And what we find at Ashoka is that actually we have lots of staff that are eager to talk about the fellows they're meeting, talk about the change they're seeing in the world. And so really there's these social media tools at our fingertips that we can use to try to promote our collective voice. One example is we're tweeting from the Ashoka Tweets account. That's at Ashoka Tweets on Twitter. And you'll see some coverage of what's happening here as well as, at home base and around the world with Ashoka. And we're really moving into the blog space as well. And it's just been wonderful to be here and to see kind of the Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything right there, transparent on all the material. It's been exciting for us.
And I was wondering, what's just being at this event, I'm wondering what's your sort of biggest kind of takeaway or I guess that, and then also maybe you could sort of just close by talking about, have you seen any like fantastic projects that kind of blew your mind, something that really just piqued your curiosity?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, this is really exciting for me and some of my colleagues from Ashoka because, we kind of look at the big picture a lot, and we elect fellows in all different issue areas, and this is an opportunity to really dive into climate change adaptation and look around at some of the really exciting projects that are happening. We have 5 fellows that are here, and I should say that I haven't had a chance to look around too much yet, and I don't have at my fingertips the examples of the ones I'm most excited about, but I'm really eager to sort of on my lunch break, wander around and see, because, of course, we're always looking for the next Ashoka Fellows as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think that's all from the floor here now, so we'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Kirsten.
When we have dry weather, agricultural production can go up, but it can go down. And that's bad for the farmers, and that's bad for the entire district where the farmers are operating. We have a team here from Indonesia that's going to talk about a really innovative program called index insurance, risk index insurance, and how that can smooth out the bumps of the up and down production in climates that are subject to drought and less rainfall than is needed to plant and harvest crops. So I'm going to turn the discussion over to Risoldi and to Daniel, and why don't you start, Risoldi, and talk about your involvement in this program.
Yeah.
What it is, really, because people's minds may glaze over when you start mentioning insurance, so you deliver the goods to them.
All right. Okay. I work for Center for Climate Risk Management. So why we are very interested in introducing this kind of concept, insurance index, because in our country, in Indonesia, is really have a very strong sectional ENSO. So during that during that condition, so normally many farmers are being affected by drought. Now, why we introduce the name of index? It is very different from the common insurance. So the payment of the insurance will be based on the index that we develop. It could be rainfall based, or it could be ENSO. So if we use the ENSO index as the insurance index, and then whenever El Nino occurs, the farmer will get a payment, whatever the decision is.
So the difference, Risoldi, is that up till now, including right now, the farmer in a drought-stricken area is likely not to plant?
No, the situation is not like that. What the farmer is, in Indonesia, normally they plant the crop twice. The second one, normally planted during the dry season. So the problem is, when the El Nino occurs, the rainfall during the dry season is very, very less. But the farmer is trying to keep planting rice for the second one.
Right.
Because when the first rice is harvested, there's still rain.
Right.
And they see on the ground so many water, they keep planting.
Right.
Even though they're being informed the El Nino will occur, they'll keep planting rice.
Right.
With the insurance, if they want to join with the insurance, try to change your crop to maize.
I see.
So when El Nino occurs, they still get a payment from the insurance, but in addition, they will get an income from maize. So that's a nice thing of introducing a climate index for them.
Exactly. Daniel, insurance, you've got to have the providers involved in this to make it work. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
So how do you do that? Are you able to persuade the providers, the insurance providers, that this is a win-win that involves them too?
Yeah, I think we've, so I'm Daniel Osgood from the International Research Institute for Climate and Society at Columbia University. And our experience, and we've worked on several of the more exploratory projects of this type, and our experience has been that there's a great appetite from the insurance companies and also from the farmers when the insurance products help them make more money and help them with their yields for these products. And there's this question if the exploratory products that have been developed over just the past few years can really be a meaningful industry. And so with this project, we're really hoping to do that.
To wrap up our interview, Rizaldi, could you tell our audience, which, by the way, is around the world, we're saying, we should have said not only good afternoon and good morning, but good evening, because in Asia, I suspect it's not exactly the afternoon right now. Anyway, Rizaldi, sum up the innovation of your project, if you would, in a couple of words. What's innovative about it?
So the innovation of this actually, how the farmers can manage the risk of climate, how they can take the advantage of this insurance index to make them brave to take a decision. If during a good years they can implement a very good technology, irrespective what will the condition of the climate, because it's being protected by the insurance. So that's the kind of the innovation.
And it's not available. Are you saying that right now a farmer can't? So you're introducing a totally new concept.
That's right.
That's definitely innovation.
Yep.
Thank you very much,
You're
Rizaldi.
welcome.
Daniel, thank you very much, and good luck with your program, and also good luck with the judges that are going to be watching you today. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Sueño, mamá, contigo toda la noche cuando me quiero despertar. No puedo, no puedo. Sueño que estoy en un camino muy largo que cruce al mar y es azul. Esperando, esperando el santo remedio de la sal, la sal. Como velo sobre tu mirada.
Hi, this is Kirsten Spainhauer. I'm here with Jessica Prue. She's with Lex Mundi Pro Bono Foundation. They do pro bono legal work for the social entrepreneurs around the world and have worked with a lot of development market awardees. So, Jessica, I wanted you to maybe tell us a little bit more about your organization and working with social entrepreneurs.
Sure. We are an organization that has law firms in 110 countries and 50 in the U.S., and we do our best to pair social entrepreneurs with law firms so that they can focus on their core mission, and we can help with issues like an employment contract or things that might not be integral, that are integral but not their core mission. So we hope that they're able to focus on what they do best and the amazing missions of everyone here, and we're happy to support the finalists of the development marketplace here.
And what do you think is special about this, the development marketplace in general?
I'm amazed at how many countries are represented here from all over the world, and we don't come to many events where there's so many countries represented. So we're happy to try to pair them with our lawyers that are all over, and it's great to see people that are on the ground with, and I've met some people who are more theoretical, and then funders all in the same place.
And so what will you take back to your organization about the event? Maybe what kind of follow-on will you take? I know that you've been coming, Lex Mundi has been coming to the development marketplace for many years, and so just wondering, kind of what's a little bit different about this year, and so how will this affect your operations going forward?
Well, we'll definitely leave with a stack of business cards from all of the fellows so we can figure out how to go about helping them. And I think what's unique about this year is definitely the focus on the environment. So we haven't worked with too many fellows in the past from any of our partner organizations that focus on the environment so much. We've worked with a few, but not so many. So we're excited to work with these environmental organizations going forward, and we hope that we're able to help them accomplish their mission.
And what's the most common, I guess, service that Lex Mundi provides to social entrepreneurs?
Well, we don't actually provide the legal services. Our partner law firms do. So our service is to pair these volunteer lawyers and to find the expertise that they have and the expertise that these people need. So I'm not a lawyer by training, but I know lawyers. And so the service that we provide is that we can find the people with the expertise. And the expertise that social entrepreneurs need varies from contracts to carbon credits. So very topical, and our expertise is finding the people with the right expertise.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll go back up to you.
আমার নাম মিস শাপলা আক্তার শারমিন। আমাদের গ্রামের নাম পূর্ব হলদিবাড়ি। আমাদের বাংলাদেশের উত্তর পশ্চিমে অবস্থিত। এলাকা ছাড়া তো আমাদের কোনো উপায় নেই যে আমাদের ওই পাশে তো আমাদের কোনো জমি জমা নাই যে ওইখানে যে আমরা বাড়ি করবো। সেজন্য আমাদের এখানে অনেকগুলো আছে আর কি, আমাদের ধনী ধনী মানুষ আছে, ওগুলো যখন বন্যা আসে ও পাশে যায়, আর যাদের নাই তারা আর কি যেতে পারে না। আর নদী বিষয় আছে যে আমাদের এখন আর কি খুবই আর কি কষ্ট, যেমন আমাদের পানি আসলে আর কি খুব সমস্যা হয়, আমাদের ঘর বাড়ি ডুবে যায়, খাওয়া দাওয়ার খুবই কষ্ট হয়, আমাদের ফসলের ক্ষেত নষ্ট হয়ে যায়। তারপর আমাদের যখন পানিটা কমে যায় তখন আসে আমাদের যে সুখ, যখন একটু একটু পানি থাকে অথচ ওই পানি দিয়ে আমাদের আর কি ফসল আমরা কাজে লাগাই পানি দিয়ে। আমাদের এটা পুরোটা পূর্ব হলদিবাড়ি গ্রাম। আমাদের গ্রামে আপদ এবং সম্পদ কোনগুলো তা আমরা এখানে তৈরি করছি। যে আমাদের আপদ হচ্ছে যে নদী, যেহেতু আমাদের প্রধানত নদী ভাঙে, নদী ভাঙার পর আমাদের নদী যখন ভাঙে তখন আমাদের এগুলা বাড়ি সম্পূর্ণ ডুবে যায়। আমাদের বন্যা আসলে এই পর্যন্ত পানি হয়, তারপর যখন আমাদের এই চকি এই পর্যন্ত পানি উঠতে থাকে তখন আমরা পায়ায় দড়ি বেঁধে এখানে ঝুলা, এখানে আমরা ছোট ভাই বোন 7 দিন এখানে ছিলাম। এখানে যখন আমাদের খাটটা ছিল তখন আমরা অল্প অল্প একটু খাইছি। আর দ্বিতীয়বার হচ্ছে যে আমাদের এখানে সাপের অতিরিক্ত ভয় ছিল আমাদের, সেজন্য আমরা ঘুমাইতে পারিনি, আমরা সারা রাত জাগনা ছিলাম। এখন বর্ষা মাস, সেজন্য আমরা চাল বেঁধে রাখছি যে বর্ষা মাসে আমরা এই চাল দিয়ে ভাত এনে খাবো। তারপর যখন আমাদের এই চাল ফুরে যাবে তখন আমরা এই ব্যাংকে কিছু টাকা দিয়ে আবার চাল কিনে নিয়ে আসবো। আর সাবান আছে যে আমাদের সাপে অতিরিক্ত মানুষকে দংশন করে, সেজন্য আমরা ঘরে চার কিনে দিয়ে বেঁধে রাখবো আর আমাদের হাত ধোয়ার জন্য। আমি এগুলা ঝুলা রাখলাম যে বন্যার পানিতে যেন ভিজতে না পারে।
কি বলে আমার মেয়ে যা ইয়ে করছে এটা ভালোর জন্য করছে। এখন আমরা আগে গেলে জানতে পারিনি, এখন আমার মেয়ে আসি জানাইছি, এখন আমরা সব জানতে পারছি। এখন আমরা আলাদা চুলে উপরে রাখা জানি, আবার লাকড়ি উপরে রাখা জানি, এগুলো তো আগে জানতাম না।
শুকার পর তারপর আমাদের যে খাওয়া দাওয়ার খুবই কষ্ট হয়, সেজন্য আমরা আলগা চুলার ব্যবস্থা করছি।
এগুলা নদীর মাটি, এগুলা মাটি দিয়ে আলগা চুলা তৈরি হয় না, সেজন্য আমরা এঁটেল মাটি এনে আলগা চুলা তৈরি করবো। আলগা চুলা বন্যার সময় এলে আলগা চুলা উঁচু জায়গায় রেখে আমরা রান্না বান্না করবো ওই সময় যদি না কষ্ট হয় সেজন্য আমরা আলগা চুলা তৈরি করতে
নদী দেখলে অত কিছু ভয় পাই না তবে নদীতে আমাদের অনেক কিছু আর কি ভাসা যায় ওগুলো দেখে আর কি ভয় পাই কি যদি আমাদের এখানে নদী না ভাঙে তাহলে এখানেই থাকবো আর যদি নদী ভাঙে তাহলে আমরা আর কি ওই দিক দিয়ে যাইতে পারি পশ্চিম দিকে আমাদের দল নিয়ে করছি যে আমরা যদি এগুলা কাজ করি এবং আমাদের শিশুরা সচেতন থাকবে এবং শিশুরা তাদের বাপ মাকে সচেতন রাখবে
Algo que todo sea el mar y estás tú esperando el santo remedio de la sal como velo sobre tu mirada.
Hello, welcome back to our interviews. I also want to remind you to log on to our blog and send us your blog messages as well as Twitters, which we can try and answer here during our interviews. I'm now here with Mr. Treat Tran, who is from Vietnam and one of the winners of the 2003 Development Marketplace on Biodiversity. So tell us why you have come back and what you have been able to do since 2003 when you were awarded with a grant of about $200,000.
I'm invited by the Development Marketplace to come as one of the three best winner of the Development Marketplace Award to present at a seminar which will be tomorrow about innovation. And also I'm invited to come to serve as a juror for this year's competition. Back in 2003, we got a grant of $200,000 to start a project in South Vietnam. The project helped protect wetlands, which is very unique, and it's the only place where it exists in the Mekong Delta right now. Is this kind of wetlands. Our idea is to create a new model of nature conservation protection. I created a protected area which is not like any protected area in Vietnam before. You know, in Vietnam, in a protected area, it means people cannot do anything. Our protected area is kind of an open protected area where the local minority people are still allowed to harvest the product from the wetland as they have been doing for hundreds of years. What difference is that we help them so that they don't have to harvest that much of Labironia, which is one wetland plant that they harvest to make product that they use in their household. For example, mat for drying rice or sleeping bag or things like that. But we still allow them to harvest Labironia, but we provide them with training so that instead of making simple product, they are making fine handicraft from Labironia. The project provide them with equipment so that they can make that kind of handicraft in good quality. Project help them to market their product to high profit markets such as tourism market or export market. And now the handicraft that people in the project making now exported to 12 different countries in the world. Wow. So the benefit they got, the profit they got from selling their product is much higher. So on average now they can earn a daily income of 3 times higher than before the project. So the idea is to link nature conservation with improving the livelihood of local people. So people believe that, you know, in order to protect nature, people have to sacrifice, but we don't believe that. We think that there are ways that we can combine conservation and livelihood.
Yeah. And do you think you can further expand the project? Right now you're covering how many people, how many families are involved?
At the beginning, the project involved about 30 family in a community that about 300 family. After 3 years, we involve all of the family in the village where project is working.
Yes.
So after 3 years, we will be able to scale up.
And do you think you could take it to other villages as well, to other areas?
Yes, the village that we are working is right at the border between Vietnam and Cambodia. But naturally, the community is across the border. So now we are thinking of, bringing the project across the border to apply it in the village on the other side of the border. And also for many other villages near the project, we're also getting them involved by providing skill training and also to teach them how to grow that kind of plant in their field, and so that they can make the same product.
That's great, very interesting. Even cross-border project it will be. What do you think about the 2009 development marketplace, which is on climate adaptation? Have you looked around to the various competitors and
yes, because I serve as one of juror for this year's competition. So this morning I've been working with my colleague Eric in interviewing the project, and we were overwhelmed by the innovation that have been presenting here. And I thought to myself, and also I share with Eric, that I wish if we have enough money to grant them, all of them, the money that they needed to implement their project. It's so wonderful.
So what are some innovative ideas that you thought were particularly interesting, that could be furthered or used in other countries? Any ideas that come to mind that you saw?
I'm not supposed to say
that as a juror.
But to say which one I prefer. There's many ideas. For example, to apply technology that have reduced the shrinkage of glacier. This is very innovative. To use biogas to run the engine that can supply the power to irrigate the field without relying on fossil fuel. And the material to use to produce biogas is, supplied by farmer in the local community. So in a way, it helps both increasing the income of local people, and also to combat, to minimize the reliance on fossil fuel.
No, I agree. Very excellent ideas out there. That's right. So any tips? Because I know that all of the finalists are very nervous while the jurors go around and they have to present their projects. Any advice you can give them from a personal experience?
I still remember how nervous we were, 5-6 years ago, and of course we know that this is very competitive, 100th idea, and at the end only 20 or at most 25 will get a grant. So everyone was very nervous, but if I can give them one advice, so to say, here everyone who come here is a winner. Your idea will be heard, and even though you won't get a grant, the story will be spread out. Your idea will be heard, and maybe you get, if you not getting the grant from the development marketplace, maybe some other donor who is interested in your idea and may fund you. So in case you're not getting the grant, it's not the end of the world. You come with a great idea, and I wish that, you will get support from somewhere.
And that's the nice thing about the development marketplace. There actually are some donors and partners are here who look around, for interesting partnerships. So that is definitely an option that's out there for all of them. That's right. So I thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for coming up here.
Thank you.
Hacerme sentir tan libre, me muero contigo, sin cómo ni por qué.
guest is Ian Noble. He is the lead climate change specialist, and he focuses on adaptation to climate change. So, welcome, Ian.
Thank you.
Tell me, why did you choose to focus on adaptation to climate change?
Well, I've worked on climate change for many years, more years than I'm prepared to admit, and I came to the bank to work on mitigation, in fact. But while looking at the threats to some of the bank's activities across the entire development field, I thought that really we needed more focus on adaptation. And luckily I had the opportunity to move into that area, and I'm very glad I did, because I think it's an important one.
You've been fairly heavily involved in the development marketplace right from the start to this event that's going on down there now. What have you seen in terms of the whole process that you think is interesting?
Well, one, I was incredibly pleased and a little surprised at the response. I believe there were 1,700 entries to start with. And looking at the quality of some of those entries is just, again, hugely rewarding. I'm sure there are a lot of ideas going to come through here. But I also think we're going to have to look carefully at some of the excellent development projects which haven't yet fully factored in climate change. And I think there's an opportunity to do that, so that's one of the challenges I think we have to do, is to bring this through to the people.
And would that fairly well fit into the work that you're doing in the World Bank?
I think this is always the case. I mean, the challenge for the bank is to continue to do development and have development as its priority, but to bring climate change, or the resilience to climate change, into that process. So I think that's fair that we're seeing this here in the development marketplace. Everybody needs support at this stage to work out just how to do that.
And as you know, development marketplace really focuses on small projects run by communities, NGOs and private sector. How does that link up to the big projects that people think about when they think about the World Bank?
Ultimately, adaptation is going to be carried out by individual people, households, small communities. So one of the challenges to the bank always is to shift our resourcing to that level and making the appropriate connections. So I think this is a hugely rich body of information to flow into the bank every year through development marketplace. I think especially the case in this one, where there's almost a tension at the moment between community-based adaptation and adaptation funding at the national level. And that bridge has to be built in this area, and I think this is going to be a huge help.
And what do you think are some of the challenges in building that bridge that perhaps the winners or the finalists should think about, but also the rest of the world can help in?
Well, in going around as a part of the jury here, we've been asking the finalists, how do you plan to scale up? And we've had some very, very interesting and innovative ideas there. It's unfortunate they've not been able to ask the question back to us, is how do we plan to actually come to meet them with our resources? So I think that's one of the other challenges. We still have to face that one.
And in fact, yesterday, for most of the day, we had knowledge sharing sessions amongst the finalists, and one of the panels was in fact thinking about how do you scale this up, how do you link to the development, and perhaps in some of the web information that might be something that perhaps people can feed in ideas and so on through blogs and Twitter messages. Finally, Ian, you've been walking around, as you say, as a jury member. You've been looking at many of the projects, talking to the finalists. What are some innovative ideas that you've seen?
Well, I won't discuss any projects in detail, but to me the ones that have really caught my attention is where you've got a pressing problem, evidence that the problem is going to get worse, and somebody comes up with an innovative idea which says, hey, I can see a way of largely overcoming that problem. And it could be something as simple as modifying an existing technology. It could be a completely new idea about incrementing a livelihood at the moment. But most of the really innovative stuff is incremental, but could have enormous impact in the longer run. I think that's really what the development marketplace is about. It's not the place for big fundamental shifts. We're going to shift this huge area from pastoralism to cropping. That's bigger than the development marketplace. Although we just talked with a couple of projects which are looking at some of the detailed mechanism of how to do it. But I think that the development marketplace power is in those innovative increments to good development.
Thank you, Ian. So we really have a challenge in getting these innovative increments to really larger scale and produce longer-term results. So join into the discussion, and hopefully as a conversation we can get to the solution. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Every year, 1.5 million people die of tuberculosis. TB is treatable if detected, but tests aren't cheap.
But if you see how the whiskers already move like his.
Bart Wiechens aims to fix that problem. He trains rats in Tanzania to sniff out the disease. They diagnose sputum samples 30 times faster than humans. It's a simple solution to a worldwide crisis, yet it had trouble finding funding.
In the beginning it was really tough. Everywhere I went to apply for funding we were just laughed at.
The World Bank's development marketplace took Wiechens seriously and launched his idea. Others followed, including the National Institutes of Health. Today, Bart Wiechens' team works with country-level TB programs to develop a screening tool for large, underserved and vulnerable populations like refugees and slum dwellers. Development Marketplace is a launching pad for the work of social entrepreneurs. It's a program with a track record of identifying projects that demonstrate results quickly. Other funders then support scaling up and replication. To find these projects, a global competition with a specific focus is held every 12 to 18 months. Thousands of ideas are submitted and then scrutinized by sector experts. Projects are judged on innovation, realism, results, and ability to grow. 100 or so finalists are invited to World Bank headquarters to present their ideas to staff, visitors, and judges. A third of them receive funding for 2 years.
And so this is 18 watts, and this will disinfect, to an efficiency that is higher than commercial systems in the U.S.
Engineer Florence Casasus developed a bucket that cleans drinking water with UV light. An Italian NGO helped Burkinabe women set up and run their country's first plastics recycling center. Now self-sustaining, the project creates income, cleans up the environment, and teaches a new generation not to litter.
We believe fundamentally this is one of the breeding grounds for some of the best and brightest ideas in development today.
Development Marketplace's support allows project teams to prove their concept. Many then attract other funding and expand. Digital Divide Data, a winner in 2003, trains disabled and disadvantaged workers in Cambodia and Laos in data entry jobs. Graduates earn 6 times the national average. A year after its grant, Digital Divide Data received support from the International Finance Corporation's Grassroots Business Initiative. Now it operates 3 centers, employs 500 people, and turns a profit. Nearly 1 billion people in the developing world need reading glasses. Fewer than 5% can afford them. With its Development Marketplace grant, the Scojo Foundation put into action a program that trains Indian women to sell cheap glasses. They earn income while workers who need to see close-up keep their jobs. Scojo now distributes reading glasses in India, Bangladesh, El Salvador, Guatemala, 30 sub-Saharan countries, and to 1 former U.S. president.
This is a prop. My glasses, in my old age, this is a prop for the next announcement. Because their commitment is to more than triple the scale of Scojo's successful micro-franchise model for training entrepreneurs to sell affordable reading glasses in the developing world.
Development Marketplace has forged partnerships with foundations and others. Because it pays the overhead, almost all partner funding goes directly to projects. Partners can also give technical support.
you don't lose time in writing huge project proposals which need consultants to help you. It goes very quickly. I mean, people are just looking at whether the ideas make sense. It is a breeding ground for new ideas, and where, I mean, like flowers, the project can grow and
Other funders often pick up development marketplace projects, expanding their reach and impact. With the sound of children's laughter comes the gush of clean water. In 2000, Development Marketplace funded the installation of 50 pumps and water towers in South Africa. Playing children power the pump. Trevor Field, the project director, says Development Marketplace funding helped them fly. Large grants totaling millions have followed. The project manufactures its own pumps now. More than 950 of them supply clean water in 4 southern African countries. In the next 3 years, they expect to reach 10 million people. Launching new ideas such as Trevor's is the goal of the World Bank's Development Marketplace.
Of the Development Marketplace, and I have Randall Kempner here with Andy at the Aspen Institute. Randall, I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about your organization, what Andy stands for, and your role here today.
Sure, Kirsten, thanks very much. Andy is the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs. We're a program of the Aspen Institute, and we are a group of organizations that support entrepreneurship in the developing world. We are trying to create a movement that's like microfinance, but aimed at the next level up. So businesses that have at least 5 or 10 employees and are looking for thousands of dollars of capital to grow as opposed to hundreds or tens.
So in a sense, it's kind of the next step for a Development Marketplace winner is to go to some of your member organizations. Can you tell us maybe a little bit more about who your member organizations are?
Sure. So I think you're right. The idea is behind Andy is we want to try to get the entire ecosystems of groups together that support entrepreneurs in emerging markets. So that includes investment funds, it includes foundations, it includes technical assistance and business assistance organizations, it includes universities. So groups around the world that either invest in, train, or provide business assistance to entrepreneurs would become members of Andy.
That's really exciting. And so can you tell me a little bit about your role here? You're a juror, correct?
That's right. I am a first-time juror here at the Development Marketplace, and have spent the morning thus far going around to 6 different groups to understand their innovative ideas to address climate change and adaptation, and have bounced from continent to continent and a variety of ideas. So it's been really eye-opening for me and kind of a great experience.
And what do you think about this year's theme about adaptation and climate change? As it's a critical issue. We're moving towards Copenhagen. What's your view on that? And then also, just how perhaps social entrepreneurs focus on adaptation and climate change issues?
I guess my first response is I wish we didn't have to deal with it. But clearly we do. And what's encouraging about what I've seen here are just, again, the variety of models that are being piloted. We are still, I think, unfortunately, at the sort of pilot phase of thinking about how to adapt to climate as the global climate increases. But I'm encouraged by what I've seen here. Again, sort of all sorts of different models, and I won't go into the specific details, but different delivery systems, different training mechanisms, different physical technologies that hopefully can help indigenous communities and indeed, hopefully, the ultimate world community to improve our ability to adapt to climate change.
Well, thanks very much. I think that's a great interview.
Great, my pleasure.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Joining us now is Perry Dawn. Welcome, Per, and thank you for joining us. Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing in the last 30 or 50 years of your life.
That's a long time. Let's take it since I started my professional career with the Swedish International Development Authority, SIDA. I started in the headquarters in Stockholm and then moved on from there to work in Mozambique for a few years. And then I joined FAO for a couple of years in Lesotho. and then back to SIDA in Bangladesh for a few years. And then I spent 11 years with IUCN based in Switzerland, working on land issues, land management issues. And after that, I moved to Rome, back to the UN, and started the global mechanism, which is the financing mechanism for the Desertification Convention, and did that for 6 years, and then I came here to the bank.
So obviously you've had a long professional career, but also spent quite a bit of time in developing countries as well as dealing with the finance and so on. So Per, I know at the moment you're based in the World Bank, and hopefully it's been a fruitful working life for you, and focusing hopefully on adaptation. So why did you choose to, in fact, bring in the land degradation and perhaps the climate risk management together as an agenda?
Well, my professional background is that nowadays I say I used to be an agronomist, because it's such a long time ago that I left the university. And all these years I've been working in rural development, agricultural development, land management, natural resource management. So it has been natural to link that experience and knowledge with the climate change agenda. So it's really been sort of an organic development rather than anything else.
So, but in most of that work, you've really been sort of dealing with maybe some of the larger scale issues in terms of the national issues or regional or global issues, getting the funding together and so on. And you've just been walking around in the development marketplace just now, and these are very small scale projects. How do you see some of these two things coming together?
I think it is, in the job I had before coming to the bank with the global mechanism, that is really the sort of the large scale and working in the intergovernmental context. So that's sort of almost the extreme opposite of the small scale that we are dealing with here these days. And the two have to merge. There is a tendency to think that the small scale, what we are seeing here, is the real world. And obviously it is. That's where people live, that's where it counts in the end. But the large scale is also the real world somehow. So it is also important that the two will have to come together. So the policies and what we call the enabling environment, which is really the task of the large scale, will have to be in place and correct for the small scale to be able to develop properly and be scaled up, as we discussed in the panel I was a member of yesterday.
So in the panel, given that it's a challenge of connecting the small communities with the policies at the national level, maybe going along regional policies, what were some of the discussion points from the knowledge sharing sessions that you were involved in?
The one yesterday, actually, was very interesting. I thought the panel was very well put together. We had different ways of looking at the upscaling problem, which I thought was certainly helpful for me, hopefully for everybody else also. And the issues that were mentioned as necessary to be able to have a successful upscaling, that obviously you will have to have the knowledge, you will have to build the capacity, you will have to, and this is a very important point, you will have to have the institutional framework at the village level, at the local community level, local government level, at the district level, and all these steps, they will have to be put in place. The technical solutions, as we see here also, many times they are simple, technically simple, and they should be in a way, because people who need them, they are poor in most of the countries we are operating. So it will have to be low cost, low cost, low risk solutions. And so that is many times not the real problem when we try to find solutions. The institutional part, what I call the software, is more difficult than the hardware part of it.
Thank you, Per, for coming and joining us here and bringing your varied experience to share amongst all the people that are watching. So perhaps one of the points for discussion for people is really saying, how do we set up those institutional mechanisms so some of this effort going on at a small scale actually becomes something that is a response to climate adaptation for the future. So thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Vienen las dos, pao, 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 pero las dos tienen la culucu.
Our guest now is Mira Boone. Mira, thank you very much for joining us and interrupting your lunch.
It's a pleasure.
So, Mira, tell me, you've been walking around the development marketplace with all the finalists down there. What's your impression?
Wow, I guess my general impression is you get the sense with the climate change issue that somehow the actors are changing. And there's a real understanding that the future will now be a bit different from the past, both in terms of the weather that we experience, but also, in a sense, the potential role that communities can play in this new world. So it's exciting to see so many leaders, yeah.
And what do you do that really touches on climate adaptation?
What do I do? Probably the thing that touches me the most is working with younger people who have a sense of the future, which I think is a little bit gloomy in some ways compared to my generation. I always grew up thinking that the future would definitely be better, and my job was to make the most of that. And I think this generation understands that it will have some very significant challenges. However, I think that it's a generation that's more connected than ever. And being able to tap good information, good ideas, good inspiration into that network of young people who are confronting this challenge, for me, is the most inspirational part of my work.
Okay, so one of the things that I've faced in working with youth in climate change is they don't necessarily have a decision-making role. So given that many of the people probably watching on things like the webcast and using new technologies are younger people, how do they become more actively involved in the decision-making so they become the activists on this huge agenda?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question. Somehow, I think, with technology, and the U.S. election was an example of this, new generations are finding an expression in political activism which is quite different than the past. And I think being able to do that at scale through technologies that connect lots and lots of young people will be more of a global phenomenon. I have no doubt that the community is far ahead of our political and business leaders when it comes to addressing the challenge of climate change. And that makes sense because the horizons that our politicians and business leaders work with are so narrow, so short term. Whereas as individuals, of course, we look towards aging and, our kids and grandkids. And so our personal horizon is much bigger. I think that there are two ways in which young people can feel good about their ability to become, make more decisions. One is very much about trying to shift the incentives for political and business leaders to think long-term, invest long-term, and make decisions that go beyond the political or the media cycle. And I think that's beginning to happen already. And the other, I think, is at the individual level. And it's so simple. It's almost trite. The top 10 things that we can do. We can walk to work. We can not use packaging. We can travel less. We can, all of those things. But I think that there has to be a heart connection. And when you shift at that values level, then the behavior follows naturally. And I think young people, through these technologies, are making that shift a lot faster than older people.
Okay, so it's a really important point. Climate change is in terms of the impacts at least, they've already occurred and they're going to continue to occur even if we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions now, because there's a lag in the atmosphere and so on. So what are some of the ideas that you've seen amongst the finalists over there that really address the behavioral change that has to occur if you're going to take this on the long term rather than a 2-year project and so on?
Two different themes that I'm finding very interesting. And it's sometimes challenging because at times proposals are written about some things, but then when you talk about the proponents, they actually plan other things and, trying to not read your own desires. The two things that I find are really interesting are, as human beings, what we do is adapt. That's how we've survived and evolved as a species. And we've done that with nature, by definition. That's how we eat, that's how we sustain ourselves, that's how we find warmth. And so this newfound desire, particularly among indigenous communities, that the preservation of nature is actually about preserving the livelihood of community. And that adapting to more severe weather, more prolonged droughts, more variability in climate, by definition means working closer with nature and preserving nature. So I think that's very interesting. And some of the projects are more concrete around patrols that go out into reserves and so forth. A lot are about human rights. And I think that's critical because it creates an active voice for communities that have the potential to protect biodiversity and their own livelihoods going forward. And given how quickly climate change rules at a global level are changing, to be able to have active voices that have legal standing representing communities that rely on this nature for their survival, I think is a very, very exciting thing. So there's a class of projects like that that are terrific. My favorite type of activity, I think because we're so clever as a species and we do things so well, already we are adapting. And finding those smart ideas and sharing them, I think, is one of the challenges of our generation. Finding ways for communities in the South to share their own practical understanding quickly. And I see some of that thinking, and I think it's very, very exciting.
I agree with you because that is not just South-South sharing or community sharing with each other, but also the communities in developing countries who are at the forefront of many of the impacts of climate change, actually sharing with the communities of the developed countries which might still be grappling with them.
This happens within countries. I know that in Australia, where I live, we have severe weather risks are us. We have so many challenges around bushfires, around floods and cyclones. And I know that, indigenous Australians who have lived on this incredibly challenging continent, very dry, harsh weather, for 40,000 years, have had a practice of wildfire conservation and managing fire risk, which all of a sudden we realize is incredibly relevant. Now, part of the challenge that I think we all have, knowledge from the past needs to be applied in a circumstance which is terribly different than the past. We have almost 7 billion people moving to 9. The speed of the increase in severe weather is so pronounced. We need to very quickly tap into what is relevant and redeploy it in even more relevant ways. But it's very exciting to think that we can draw on that.
Thank you very much, Mara, for sharing those ideas. And I hope that others will join in and say what are some really interesting ideas of changing behaviors and moving and combining different knowledge sources. Thank you again.
You're welcome. My pleasure, Habiba.
Hi,
Hi, this is Kirsten Spainhauer down on the floor of the Development Marketplace, and I have Roberto Chavez here with me. He's a World Bank retiree and now doing some consulting work for WBI. He's an architect and an urban planner and does quite a bit of work on adaptation and climate change. Roberto, I'd like to just get an idea what you think about this year's theme, the Development Marketplace, and the type of projects you've seen on the floor.
Well, I'm very, I'm very, very pleased to see the focus of the marketplace on this theme this year is highly, highly relevant. In fact, it becomes more relevant with each year that passes. In particular, I was struck by one case, which was a problem that I encountered working in the Sacred Valley of the Incas on a project just a couple of years ago, which was early warning systems for avalanches. And the impact of avalanches in the Vilcanota Valley cannot be minimized, not only because of the damages, but of the particular impact it can have on tourism in the country. This one avalanche, while I was supervising a bank project, took out 100 meters of railway where 400 tourists had just passed a few minutes earlier. It could have been a major disaster, had a huge impact on the Peruvian economy that depends so heavily on tourism. And here I found an early warning system that is so simple, that can be done at really the local level, using plastic Coke bottles and different devices for bells. Really, really ingenious and much more sophisticated than some, much less sophisticated but much more applicable for wide and rapid deployment than some of the more elaborate high-tech systems that I had been researching. So that's a case in point. But there's many other examples as I look around, and I'm just totally awed and very delighted. The other area that's very important is that of the indigenous knowledge. There's such a tremendous wealth in indigenous knowledge that has to be unleashed and brought to bear on this project. Again, I really commend WBI for taking this up now.
Well, and we actually also have a privilege to have you here as well. Roberto took advantage and participated in the first Development Marketplace, which was staff-oriented. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience in that time doing a project, and then also just now your thoughts on targeting external organizations for the Development Marketplace.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. In fact, I've been a proponent of tearing down the walls on the 20th anniversary of the Berlin Wall between the World Bank and the external world. Back then I was unhappy that it was all bank focused, and now I'm a little unhappy that there isn't more interaction with the bank. We had the innovation days just a few weeks ago, and there's some overlap in these areas. So I again encourage Sanjay, our vice president, to look at how we can integrate these activities more and make this more porous exchange of knowledge between ourselves and some of these brilliant practitioners that are out there with all these projects.
Well, and actually that's a big focus of the new innovation practice at WBI, doing externally targeted events, and then also just bringing bank staff into conversation with the external players to have them influence bank operations. I guess just maybe one last question. So just what are you going to take away from this experience here at the Development Marketplace today?
Well, for one, some of the tools that I've seen here, there's a lot of ideas, but there's some very practical, do-it-yourself sort of tools. In particular, I want to share with my Peruvian counterparts what I've learned here in terms of this early warning system for slides. And there's a lot of focus on what we do about flooding. And there's reference, in fact, to the massive floods that there have been in Manila. There's been 4 typhoons in the space of a month recently. So there's a lot of things to take away in terms of thinking about disasters, not as only as reconstruction after disaster, but in reconstructing of mitigating and preventing the impact of them the next time around. So there's a lot of ideas that you can take away on that here. How to improve your disaster preparedness using SMS text messaging first is one very good example there. Not a lot of costs involved in doing that.
Almost everyone has one now.
Everybody has them in Manila. But there's a lot to learn from other countries. The Cubans have one of the best, most highly organized disaster preparedness. We hear of all these hurricanes that go through Cuba, and we never hear of any casualties. I don't know if you've noticed. Whereas it comes to Central America, Salvador, 133 people killed. In Cuba, it's because it's a community-based participatory system where they start with 72 hours before they're tracking it with the international weather systems. 72 hours before a potential storm, they're cleaning manholes. And then they're boarding up windows. There's a step for every hour before the potential hit. If it doesn't come, great. They start taking things down. But if it does, at the end, they've moved out everybody from a specific area, and then they start moving them back. And it's all community-based.
So a well-oiled machine.
That could be easily replicated in the Philippines if we can find the way to transfer that degree of social organization.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, great.
See you around.
All right.
Hi, I'm Chris Neal, and I'm here on the floor with Noah Wilson, who has been working here. Noah's you're a student at Warren Wilson College, but tell us about what you're doing here on the floor at Development Marketplace, Noah.
Well, I'm on a short sabbatical from Warren Wilson and doing social media work. So I am doing a combination of helping folks set up social media accounts on Facebook and Flickr and YouTube and LinkedIn and you name it. We're doing all kinds of social media. We're also uploading a lot of content, both videos and photos and interviews to the blog, which is a lot I think I'm working on and publicizing the blog. And we're also working with these little flip cams, which are these digital camcorders. They're really easy to use. It's like a press a button kind of camcorder. So people can wander around and ask questions of various booths and do interviews and ask World Bank staff what they're up to. And
so what's happening now with all of these? There are all these little videos being made, aren't there? They're short videos that are being posted on YouTube right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, a lot of them actually manage to get up just immediately on the web as they come to us. But especially when we have 30 cameras out, which is how many we have on the floor at any given time, that means there's a lot of content we can't even get to. So we, at the end of the night, come back to the office and sit downstairs and just edit through content, look through content, put up videos, and make kind of playlists. So we have hundreds of videos at a time.
And you said earlier that you had seen that a climate change blogger had mentioned what's going on here at Development Marketplace. That sounded pretty interesting. Tell us about our connection with the climate change blogs.
Well, last night I stayed up till about midnight writing emails to various bloggers who I really admired. And this morning, Bill Hewitt, who writes for the Foreign Policy Institute, wrote back and said, "This is great. I just put up a post." He was gushing about us there and just said, "This is awesome. Who else you should talk to." And it's really important for blogs are this kind of symbiotic system where bloggers talk about one another and mention one another so that the work kind of gets done by everybody. So Bill writes 2 paragraphs saying what we're doing, and then someone can go find us and see 400 videos. So Bill doesn't have to post the videos himself, and it's great. So we're helping other bloggers out by mentioning them when they're doing work for us, and when they're doing great work, if they have someone like Ashoka. And then conversely, when we're doing good stuff, they can tell about us.
So it's kind of like a symbiotic viral thing that's going on here now. Eh? One thing, too, that how old are you, Noah, if you don't mind my asking?
I'm 21. I'm a busy guy.
You're 21. We have quite a few young people working here. One thing that struck me was that I looked at one of the exhibits and they were talking about recovering the ancestral knowledge that grandmothers have, that old women have. But I thought that was very interesting, but it's also very interesting to see what knowledge young people have here and how they're able to bring this kind of social media the comfort level with social media is much higher than people my age. I'm impressed with that.
That's a great comment because it speaks to how important it is to have multiple generations working together, because the elderly folk, the elders, the people who have all that knowledge, it's really important that people in their middle years and young folk talk to them, and that the young folk talk to the elders as well, that everybody kind of talks to one another, because we have knowledge of the newest technologies, and they have knowledge of that really important older technology that worked, that was very basic and simple. Didn't have all the moving parts that things have today. So it's a great combination of skill sets, and we have to have people here who are speaking towards that, because we're helping get that ancient knowledge to young people on the net.
And no, I gather that maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, you didn't really know that you'd be doing this today, right? How did that come about?
No, my aunt, speaking of generations, called me up a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey Noah, I'm doing this amazing event. I'd love to have some people there who do social media. Do you have any time?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I probably could, spare a little time." And a couple of weeks later, I'm spending, 20 hours on doing the logistics, before I come here, and then hopping on a plane to DC and spending a sabbatical here.
Well, that's great. It's great to talk to you, and thanks for all the work that you're doing here. This is really exciting stuff.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. This is great. Just seeing an event like this is so wonderful.
So we'll move on to somebody else. I think that is there another interview happening right now over here, or that's something else?
Our next guest is William Ellis. William is based at the Global Environment Facility. Welcome, William.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a little bit about what does the Global Environment Facility, or GEF, do on climate adaptation in particular?
Well, the Global Environment Facility is a fund that was created as a result of the Rio Summit in 1991. It is designed to fund projects in developing countries through grants to address global environmental benefits. So it goes beyond traditional development to transform it into sustainable development. And in the area of climate change, we have two aspects. One is mitigation, the other one is adaptation. In the area of adaptation, we manage two funds that are under the UNFCCC, the Special Climate Change Fund and the Least Developed Country Fund. And they have financed NASHA's, the National Adaptation Plans of Action, and now they are financing the projects that resulted from that analysis. So this is our work in that field.
And of course you also have, in close partnership with UNDP, the small grants projects, which can in fact be something like the finalists can access.
Exactly. The small grants program is different from this in the sense that it is set up in each country, 123 so far, countries have a national SGP program, and they give grants up to $50,000 maximum. So the average is about 23 more or less.
So GEF, or the Global Environment Facility, is one of the partners for the development marketplace, and GEF has been supporting this for a number of years now. So we're very pleased that you could in fact also be partners with this event that's occurring here. So you've walked around here, William, since you're just across the road. What are some of the innovative ideas that you see that being displayed there?
Well, yes, of course, we are delighted to be a partner. We've funded this project for a number of years, as you have said. This year also, particularly since it deals with adaptation, which is one of the issues that we deal with. I think there's a lot of very well-placed imagination, actually, transforming techniques that might have been used in other parts of the world or for other purposes, and which are now being used for something that's completely different or new. Of course, I've seen some of the projects that I've looked at more in depth, but the use of technology for filtering water, for building differently, for generating drinking water. There's such a variety of ideas that are so valuable that it's really very difficult to decide, how to, since we have only a limited amount of money, what are the ones that we should finance. But that's why we've got a large number of jurors, and it will be through the mixing of all these opinions that we'll come out with a final result, and I think that's very good.
Well, of course, you could allocate more funding, but perhaps there are people out there that might be able to actually pick up some of the ideas that don't necessarily make it to the finalists.
Well, exactly. On the one hand, we normally provide seed money, so we always expect others to participate. That is happening, but of course we could always have more people participating, more institutions interested in providing for this. But then those who have not received funding in this process are still out there. They still need support, and they deserve support. So we hope that through all this process, like what we are doing right now, others will be able to see this, become interested, and then get in touch with those projects that were not funded and help them out too.
So I understand, William, that you've been in GF for basically 2 years. So you're still in that nice period where you can bring in new ideas into an organization as complex as the Global Environment Facility, or GEF. So what is it perhaps that you've seen over the last 2 days, and also the discussion with the jury that's going on, that you think could influence what's happening in the GEF, climate adaptation in particular?
Yes, well, I've been, involved with the GEF in its inception, at the beginning as a negotiator, as one of the ones who set it up, then as a council member, and now working on the Secretariat, which is the other side of the fence. And that has been very interesting because I've been able to see both sides of the aspect, the side of an operational focal point who has to deal with the projects on one hand, and the side of the Secretariat who's trying to ensure that the objectives are being achieved. I think the key element of this kind of activity is with civil society. And the work with civil society means that we can really impact local communities, so that the action is local but the effect is global, which is what we're supposed to address.
Thank you very much, William. So join us in thinking, how do you pick up these small-scale ideas and finance them? Thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
عاش بالعات الناس هاج البحار وحاج عاش بالعات الناس الرحيم الرحيم والباقي سار بقرهم وساروا والباقي سار بقرهم وساروا والباقي سار بقرهم وساروا والباقي سار بقرهم وساروا الرحيم
Joining me now is Warren Evans. Warren is the Director for the Environment Department here at the World Bank. Warren, this is not the first development marketplace for you. You've been there right from the beginning. So what is it that's really you find fascinating about development marketplace?
Well, I was fortunate shortly after I joined the bank, a little more than 6 years ago, I was made a juror. One of the first things I did, and I was just absolutely fascinated with the energy, the commitment, the excitement of the different finalists, and also the diversity of the finalists. This is the one thing we do every year that we don't necessarily worry about the repayment or anything like that. This is about innovation. It's about getting out there, running risks, but giving people that have tremendous energy and entrepreneurial spirit an opportunity to make these things happen. And I don't think there are many initiatives like this in the world. So that's what it's all about.
So for a change, we're not being a bank lending money, but we're actually encouraging solutions from ground up.
That's absolutely and it's not just about the money. It's also the opportunity, the kind of the spirit that's generated during these events. The finalists really establish a camaraderie that you don't see often. They have an opportunity to learn from us and us to learn from them and them to learn from each other. That is a rare opportunity for anybody. And of course, having some serious grant money behind it doesn't hurt. So it's just, this is a unique opportunity for all of us. And I was also fortunate because the first development marketplace that was a thematic development marketplace was on environment. And we learned a lot. I think our development marketplace team learned a lot on what to do, what not to do. That was about 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So this year we're doing adaptation to climate change. We've benefited from all these. We have a whole new array of new initiatives as part of this in terms of what we're doing right now, the communications around it, but also the first opportunity to bring indigenous communities in a very well-organized fashion to participate, and that's really a big plus of this year's DM as well.
So Warren, not only you head the environment department, but in there is the climate change group. And one of the Twitter messages that we got was basically, how do we get relevant climate data, which I'm going to add has to be good quality data, and make it available to people widely. So what is it that you're doing perhaps that can in fact make it easier for people to get that kind of information?
Well, first off, I think it's what we've learned over particularly the last year has been that that data is not easy to get, and when you do have data, you have to be very, very careful on how you use it. So I think perhaps as important as understanding how to get information, how to get data, is really to what extent we should rely on that as opposed to a whole range of other sources of information that are relevant to the needs that communities have, that governments have to build climate resilience into the development process. The study we did on economics of adaptation to climate change, that's an ongoing study, showed us very clearly what the uncertainties are in the use of models and so on, and how big of a range of uncertainties that all require assumptions to deal with them are. And sometimes you feel like you'd be just as well off taking all the tremendous development experience we have globally, the international community has globally, and saying, based on all that experience, what do we do to really climate proof, to building climate resilience into the development process? Having said that, there's a tremendous increase in availability of necessary information for governments, for communities, in understanding the changes in weather patterns and so on. And I think that helping communities have access to modern information technology is probably the key. Helping them to understand where to go to get this information is the key. Once they understand that, they'll do it. we're seeing this already this week. You all came up with a brilliant idea of giving each of them a little video camera, and I've never seen so many people making movies all over the place of each other and of their booth and so on. And it's fantastic. So just give them the tools, give them a little bit of the information, and then it'll be used effectively.
So some of the ideas down there are really sort of saying, we know what we've experienced in the past. We can get access to technologies which are relatively simple, like we've done with the camera and so on. And in fact, they are developing the adaptation options. So it's bottom-up solutions. So thank you very much, Warren.
You bet.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Well, here we are again. I'm Chris Neal again, and I'm here with Will Kennedy, who's with the United Nations Office for Partnerships. He's come down to Washington from New York today to look at development marketplace. So tell me, Will, what do you think about what you've seen?
Well, to me, this is what I always believed development was supposed to be. It's local solutions to local problems led by communities on a cooperative basis and using local resources and technologies to address really global development challenges. And I think that this is, well, at least for me, the leading marketplace for social enterprise, social locally based development for innovative solutions to global problems that I've seen.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the United Nations Office for Partnerships is doing in the whole climate change area?
Sure. Well, we were founded originally as the UN Fund for International Partnership. We worked with the UN Foundation, which is Ted Turner's public charity here in the U.S., to program the $1 billion gift to the United Nations that Ted Turner provided. And Ted Turner's highest priority is to address the issues of climate, with a focus particularly on the mitigation challenge, but also in terms of providing access to energy services to people that live off the grid in urban and peri-urban or rural areas of developing countries. So.
Have you had a chance to look at some of what the indigenous communities are presenting here?
Yeah, I have, and it's I just came from a presentation of rainwater harvesting systems for pastoralist people in Kenya, and it's a great example where they're using local materials, they're using local labor. It's very cost effective, has a tremendous benefit for the local community. In this case, they have one system specifically for schools, so all those school children have access to clean water. And then they also build in the latrines, so there's a sanitation dimension to it as well. So I just thought it was outstanding.
One thing that I find striking here is how you see so many micro-level impacts of climate change in communities where they're actually seeing it in the animals, in the plants, and in the growing seasons. They're trying to come to terms with solutions at a micro level. But the idea is here to try to get those micro-level solutions shared so that others can benefit from them. Is this something that the UN office is involved in as well?
Well, we're right now working with the small grant program of UNDP and the Global Environment Facility, which is an extraordinary global small grant program to reach communities just like these. To support their efforts to sustainably manage the resources, the natural resources they depend on, and to improve their economic well-being. But I think in the whole climate discussion, if I have a frustration, we're always focusing on global mitigation challenges, national adaptation strategies, and we forget that, in fact, much of adaptation is going to happen on a very locale-specific basis, and is going to be resolved. And it's really a challenge of the international community, the United Nations, the World Bank, and others, to support the efforts of local communities to build resilience to climate impacts.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And in many cases, that the political will seems to be lacking at the national and global level sometimes. Whereas when you get down to the community level, where they're actually seeing the impacts already, they're already mobilized around this issue.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think this is the ethical imperative of our time. And I think what the development marketplace represents is a fundamentally different way of approaching development, and it's a bottom-up approach, and it's an empowerment-based approach, and I think you're going to see this model taking off and being replicated and scaled by other institutions because of its importance.
Well, we certainly hope so, and perhaps we'll be doing it in partnership with the UN in the future.
Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So we'll go on to another interviewee in a moment.
Guangxi Province in southern. Until recently, farmers here burned wood for cooking and heating. Now they're leading a sustainable energy revolution. Thanks to some help from the government project supported by EFAD, a UN agency working to adapt technology to the needs of poor rural people, farmers like C.A. Oishun are now capturing methane from animal droppings and human waste and using it to produce their own fuel.
It all flows into a biogas digester, a large tank buried underground. The waste comes in here, and as it ferments inside, the gas builds up and travels back out through this tube. It takes the gas into the house where we use it to cook.
In capturing and using methane for cooking and lighting, CA not only has an abundant supply of inexpensive fuel, but he's reducing its global warming effect. At the same time, as waste decomposes inside CA's new biogas digester, he's left with another fuel, an organic fertilizer high in nitrogen.
Since applying the fertilizer to my cucumber plants, they've grown much bigger than before when I used chemicals. They even taste better.
Although biogas technology has been available in China for decades, a growing income gap between city dwellers and farmers has fueled its recent revival. In the last 2 decades, 200 million rural people have moved to China's cities. One of the ways the central government is trying to make rural life more appealing is by offering farmers cash incentives to build biogas digesters so that they can produce their own fuel cheaply. Since Leo Shun Sayan's family began producing biogas on their farm, he no longer spends 3 hours a day collecting wood for cooking. Instead, she's taken training that's helped her make improvements to the family's tea farm, which now earns more money. Thousands of farmers across the province have done the same, contributing to a drop in rural poverty, according to EFAD.
This project started in 2001, and 3 years later we could see that overall the households have moved up from poverty to low income and even out of poverty. After 3 years we observed already that about 10% had already moved on. So about 20,000 households.
Thanks to government financial incentives and education tours like this one supported by EFAD, there are now 3 million biogas tanks in operation across Guangxi, making the province the largest producer of biogas in China, if not the world. As each one routes animal and human waste into biogas digesters, they not only prevent vast amounts of methane from escaping into the atmosphere, but an estimated 8 million tons of standard coal and 13 million tons of firewood from being burned each year, making Guangxi one of the greenest provinces in China.
With me here is Marianne Fay. Marianne is recently appointed Chief Economist for the Sustainable Development Network. So firstly, congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
But she was also the co-director for the World Development Report, which is a flagship report for the World Bank. So Marianne, what were some of the major messages from the World Development Report, particularly on adaptation, that we can share with the people watching us on webcast?
Okay. I think all of us have to acknowledge that climate change will stress people physically and economically, and it will also stress the resources that they depend upon. water, crops, natural resources, forests, and so on and so forth. So it's really critical that we start thinking already now about adapting to the climate of the future, and more specifically, the variety of climates that we will face, rather than continue planning for the climate of the past. I think one of the things all of us are increasingly aware of is the fact that there will be a lot more extremes and a lot more variation. One author has talked about global weirding rather than global warming. And I think both at the community level and at the national level, at the city government level, we really need to start incorporating this new form of planning, what we call in the report robust decision making.
So that's an interesting idea, because many of the projects in the development marketplace are dealing with not the increasing mean, as you might say, but also the sort of extremes. So extreme droughts are something that many communities are facing, and there's some innovative projects in there. How can the World Bank, given your work and your career here, pick up some things like that, and through perhaps the messages of WDR, put it into its own work?
Okay. One of the key messages that we have in the report is the fact that to be effective, adaptation has to tap local knowledge. Because as all of us know who work on development, or those of us who live in developing countries know, there's a tremendous adaptation deficit already. So a big part of the adaptation challenge is actually tackling this adaptation deficit, looking at our existing vulnerabilities and weaknesses. Nobody's better placed to do that than the people on the ground, whether it's the local water engineer, whether it's the Farmers Association who know that they're dealing with, in Africa they were telling us, we used to know when the rains were coming. That was in Kenya. We used to know where the rains were coming. Now we don't know when they come, and we don't even know whether they'll come at all. So they know what challenges they're facing. And while many of them may want to tap outside, may need to tap outside for some of the new knowledge or new techniques, whatever solution is proposed has to be based on the local knowledge. So I think one of the key messages and one of the things that we want to see increasingly in bank projects is tapping this knowledge about current vulnerability. And then I think we as practitioners can then help put it in the context of what knowledge is coming from the big international institutions and so on and so forth.
But one of the roles that we can play perhaps is really getting that knowledge from the different communities and in fact making it available to the others. So is there something that perhaps you've worked on before that
Indeed. Yes, indeed. I mean, first of all, I think the development marketplace is a great way to tap that kind of knowledge and help share this. We've got a number of examples in the report. For example, the barefoot hydrologists of Andhra Pradesh, where with the help of an NGO, over 1 million farmers have managed to learn how to more sustainably manage their water resources by learning how to measure underground resources and as well as the use that is made by the community. And these are mostly illiterate farmers. They're not relying on anything high-tech. So this kind of knowledge we can really spread around and help spread around. There's other examples from the City of London, for example, that we've tried to spread around.
So in a way what you're saying is not necessarily the scientific and technical knowledge, exactly. It's bottom-up knowledge that's important.
Indeed, very much so.
So it's very heartening to hear that. And one of the messages that we got on Twitter was really saying, how do you in fact improve the local population's situation by getting them to understand what's happening and maybe making the information more available. So it's not necessarily climate information, but it's the practices on the ground. Is that what you are sort of saying?
Very much so. And we've got an interesting set of examples if you compare what the City of Boston did on climate change versus what the City of London did. In Boston, they got resources, they got a grant, and they involved all the big thinkers and the big universities there. And they made a very nice analysis of the problem that then went and sat on a shelf. At the other extreme, in London, they had very little money, and they spent all that money just getting neighborhood groups together to sort of look at their vulnerabilities. And it became a bottom-up system, a bottom-up initiative that then blossomed into this London warming campaign, which has been extremely effective. And 10 years after they started it, it's still ongoing, whereas the Boston one didn't last very long. So I think that's a great example of how, empowering the community doesn't mean just going and getting
just the best scientists out there, but it's instead tapping the local knowledge.
Community participation and stakeholder engagement, extremely important component. Finally, Marianne, given that you finished WDR and is now hopefully available, where can people who are watching this perhaps get more information?
The best thing is to just Google, go into Google and go WDR 2010 or World Development Report 2010. That's easy to remember. The entire report is available on the web. You can also find it through the World Bank's website, but as you know, it's always very difficult to find things on the World Bank's website, so better to rely on Google. And we are happy also to answer any questions and any requests for graphs and PowerPoints. It's always useful to have some of these fancy graphs in your back pocket.
So thank you very much for taking the time to join us in your busy day, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, hello again, and here we are now with Kevin Purcell, who's a Washington, D.C. resident, one of the general public here from Washington, D.C. Welcome to Development Marketplace, Kevin.
Thank you very much.
Tell us, you've looked around here. What's your impression of what you've seen here in terms of innovation for climate change?
Oh, it's great. I'm really impressed with the diversity of the methods for addressing that problem, and it's really got me excited about my future career.
Tell me, what are there any particular projects that impressed you particularly, or that stuck in your mind as being particularly interesting?
Oh, I'm still looking around like crazy. I love this idea right here with the wave energy conversion system, mitigation, trying to mitigate the energy caused by waves that erode shorelines. That's really exciting. But I've just started to look around, so I can't wait to find out more.
You're a specialist in design and making machinery and trains, for example, user-friendly. I wonder, in terms of the climate change issue, are there impacts of climate change here in Washington, D.C. in your life that you've noticed, or or is this something kind of new for you?
Well, this winter is turning out to be a very mild winter compared to what it's been. I'm from California, and my mom still lives in California, and she says she can't get over how much rain is there. And we're experiencing just the opposite. Now, whether this year is just a normal year, or if it's just normally different, or if it's actual global warming starting to take hold, we don't know yet. It'll take a couple years to find that out, but it's inescapable that it's happening.
Do you find, like in your circle of friends and family and colleagues and so on, do you find that there's discussion of climate change? I mean, one thing that struck me here is that it seems obvious to people that climate change is really a real problem, and yet a few years ago there were quite a few politicians right here in the United States who said that the science is uncertain on it. Well, what do you think now in your own circle?
Oh, wow. We all know what's going on. Back in a former lifetime of mine, I used to work for the U.S. Geological Survey. That was about 15 years ago at least. And we all knew back then global warming, global climate change was happening. So for my immediate family, it's nothing. My extended family, some of them live in the Midwest, and they're farmers. And at first, they were very skeptical. It didn't exist at all. But they have seen things happening there. Parts of the Midwest are becoming more Dust Bowl-like than has been in the past. They're undergoing more droughts. So they're having to admit that, I think there's something to this. So.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Kevin, and I hope that you find it useful and interesting to continue to look around at the booths here.
Oh, thank you very much. This is just great. This is wonderful. I just can't wait to see more.
Okay. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. I think you're ready to go up there. Yeah. Okay.
My guest now is Ekpi Osifo Daoud. Welcome, Ekpi, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So, Ekpi, the development marketplace is going out there, and you've been fortunate enough to find time to actually walk around there. So what's your impression of what you saw down there on the floor that we can share with people out on the webcast?
So, no, thank you, Habiba. It was really exciting to be down there, and I spoke to several participants who were very passionate about what they do and how this could actually make a change in the future. So I think what I really enjoyed most was really the different ideas, but also the passion of several of the participants.
And the development marketplace is something that the bank has run for the last 9 years. And it's been moved as a home in the World Bank Institute, which is the knowledge sharing and capacity development part of the bank. So how do you see the two coming together?
I think it's a great fit. I mean, as you know, I'm in the innovation practice, and the development marketplace has moved to the innovation practice. And like Graham was saying yesterday, I mean, the development marketplace and the innovation days in many ways will be sort of core products of what the bank does on innovation. And I think given the WBI's increasing focus of innovation, having the DM, which focuses a lot on both internal, but particularly the external, what's happening externally on innovation, that this will really be a significant move, both for the DM, but also, I think, from bringing ideas into the bank.
Okay, so Ekpi, you're a doctor by profession, early profession, is that right?
Yes, for my sins.
So, you know, in terms of the earth, some people have sort of drawn the analogy between a patient as the equivalent of the earth. So if you bear with me and take that analogy a little bit further, so like the climate change is like perhaps a tumor that's starting to develop on the earth. And we have to try to respond to it by trying to bring something together that will heal it. If you took that as the analogy, is there something that you saw down there that perhaps gets us nearer to healing the earth?
I think it's an interesting analogy, but I think, some of the things I saw not only help heal the earth, but also do other benefits or have other sort of positive benefits. So maybe you cure the tumor, but you also make the person much better in another way, maybe much healthier in another way. And there were some really fantastic ideas from, the stove in Malawi, which was designed by a farmer, I was looking at the SMS used for disasters in the Philippines, which I can imagine if they had that during the Asian disaster a couple of years ago, it may have resulted in sort of more lives saved as a sort of more immediate response to the climate issues. But I think there were really a lot of exciting ideas. But I think, like you said, but not only issues that, many of the ideas also dealt with climate adaptation or mitigation issues, but even interestingly also created benefits for right now.
Yes.
So all the benefits are not just in the future.
So in a way, the analogy is not an ill health, but really health maintenance and even better life things. But finally, as a question for you, you work as a World Bank staff, and you've seen many of these ideas. How do you think we can integrate perhaps some of those ideas into the work that you do and take them forward?
I think the development marketplace is a fantastic tool to help scan ideas or see what's happening, especially sort of early stage ideas. And I think by having, myself or several colleagues around here to sort of get ideas and think how we can build this into some of the advice we give clients, which is one way I think the bank can help, and also which a small subset of them will get some funding to move on to the next stage. But even the ideas that don't get funding to move on to the next funding from the DM could still be picked up by other people in the bank, but also our partner sort of organizations, because I think one of the key advantages or comparative advantages of the bank is not only sort of financial scale up, But even, like you had mentioned earlier, the issue of knowledge exchange, you and your team have been working on, which is fantastic. But also making connections with other partners in the development field, who can also help some of these various initiatives scale up.
So in a way, really create a community that can share information and knowledge around the world.
I think share enough information around the world, but some financing. I mean, money is important. It's not the only thing, but always important. And also, like you said, making connections to other people who may be able to provide money or other resources.
So finance is one of those topics that's been occurring throughout many of these interviews here. So I guess to me what would be really fascinating is what are some of the ideas out there perhaps that people can send in either through blog or Twitter messages to really say, how can we take this forward and meet that challenge through multiple partners, including themselves?
I would agree with you entirely.
So Ekbi, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to talk to you and sit down to talk to you rather than see you as a colleague. Thank you again.
Thank you, Habiba. Bye.
The wall here initially, and so that was destroyed by the very high tides in 2005. And I built this quite some time back, over the years, and that was destroyed, so I rebuilt it.
Anote Tong is obsessed with the sea. He's the man in charge of a vanishing nation. The seas that have years are rising because of global climate change. It's Tong's job as president of the country to decide what to do.
For quite some time I did not sleep because I had no solution to a problem that nobody has a solution to. What happens to us as a people in the future? Do we disappear as a culture? And so these are the issues that keep me awake.
Tong must decide the fate of his people. Should they stay and fight or evacuate their island home? Tong's nation is called Kiribati, 33 atoll islands stretching across the Pacific Ocean, 7 hours flight from Australia, 10 hours from the United States. Strips of land on the edge of the world so low that from the water they seem to vanish.
In Kiribati, it's very hard to see the next island. 10 kilometers out or even 15 kilometers out, you can no longer see land. So how we located is we use the reflection from the clouds. So that's how we navigate. Over there is Marianne, the next most immediate, which is my island. So that's where I go fishing when I go trolling.
At his home on the island of Tarawa, he has little time to fish these days. Since elected president in 2003, he spent much of his time sounding the alarm that his country is disappearing.
Already we have whole villages being washed out. There is no running away from the reality that the sea is rising. There is no running away from that reality.
These images shot during a storm in 2005 are an example of what Tong and his people are fighting against. As greenhouse gases warm the planet, water expands, waves grow stronger, and seas rise higher, as much as 2 meters by the end of the century, says one study from the University of Colorado. For the country's 108,000 residents who live on narrow strips of land just 2 meters above sea level, it's a trend that spells disaster.
We had one single large island. I think it might be possible to put seawalls around it, but it's virtually an impossibility given the geography, structure, and the scatteredness of our islands. And so where does that leave us? We have to face the reality that we have to relocate. The question is, how do we relocate?
In 2008, Tong took his dilemma to the United Nations.
Mr. President, on climate change, While the international community continues to point fingers at each other regarding responsibility for and leadership on this issue, our people continue to experience the impact of climate change and sea level rise. Here we were confronted with a number of countries wanting to achieve more economic growth and arguing the case that, of course, they must not be tied down to these stringent obligations. To me, it's offensive, it's insulting, because it's so insensitive about the fate of a people.
The people of Kiribati arrived on these islands 4,000 years ago, one of the last stops in humanity's migration out of Africa. The islands they settled stretched over an expanse of ocean the size of India. It's here at the southern tip that fishermen like 23-year-old Roberto Chavez feel the threat of global climate change most. Roberto says seawater has begun seeping into the water table, giving the well water his mother draws each day a salty taste. The frequency and size of his catch has also become less predictable. And then there's his 83-year-old father, Yobate. He's declared war against the rising tide, building a seawall and then standing guard over it each evening.
The temperatures are getting hotter, and there's a change in the level of the sea. It's getting higher. These changes are affecting the food we grow. Before, our coconuts were big, but now they're as small as our fists.
Coconuts are among Kiribati's chief exports. With fewer to sell, many like Roberto are finding it harder to earn a living. Even so, Tong resists the idea of moving people off the islands en masse, creating a nation of climate change refugees.
This is the last thing that I want to put forward as an option for our people, because having lost our homeland, having lost our cultural identity, I don't think we want to lose our dignity.
Tong needs to address immediate problems being created by climate change, like poverty and shrinking food supplies. So while he considers how best to move people off the island, he plans to develop the country's economy.
The idea is to encourage the development of the islands. There are people with more time to do it. We just need to be able to provide them with the opportunity, the skill, and whatever equipment they need.
But convincing development organizations to invest in a country that won't be around in 50 years is not easy. For the first time, the UN agency specializing in agricultural development, IFAD, sends a team to assess the situation on Kiribati's most remote southern island, Arore.
We would like to understand some of the challenges that you face with the environment. And is there any change that people have noticed in weather, in the sea?
Over the last few years, we've seen extreme changes in the environment. There has been a lot of damage to trees. Wells are salty. There is erosion along the coastline. And because we've had such little rain over the last few years, our crops are dying. And there is no fruit on the trees. These are things we can't fix ourselves.
If we think of what the President of the country is saying, that the whole survival of the islands over the next 50 years is in question, a challenge that we face is what happens in the course of this 50 years. We've heard from the communities themselves that they're struggling to feed themselves. So how do we respond to this is an enormous challenge.
I'm joined by Bruno Laporte. He's the Director of Thematic Knowledge and Learning at the World Bank Institute, which is the capacity building and knowledge exchange part of the World Bank. So Bruno, what does a Director of Thematic Knowledge and Learning do on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you, Abiba, and first of all, thank you for inviting me to have a conversation with you today. The World Bank Institute is, as you know, capacity development arm of the World Bank, and we focus on knowledge transfer and learning for capacity development. As director of the Knowledge and Learning Department, we focus on a number of thematic areas, including climate change, which I will, of course, use as the first example, but we also work on urban questions, health, system strengthening questions, public-private partnerships, and also the whole set of issues around growth and crisis, competitiveness of countries, and so forth. For all these practices, our role is really to try to integrate and package the best knowledge we can find outside the bank and inside the bank. So it's very often a combination of the sort of more rigorous academic knowledge that exists in universities with the operational knowledge of the bank. And we use that knowledge as a basis for a number of interventions, from executive development programs or senior policymakers to live, just-in-time knowledge exchange programs, where we try to put in contact and connect practitioners in one part of the world that have specific questions and problems with people in other parts of the world or in the other parts of the region who may have a solution or at least some knowledge that they would like to share about those issues. And of course, part of what we do also is very much what is happening today here is the innovation side of our business, because we feel that there is tremendous amount of knowledge and innovative practices out there outside the bank that needs to come in the bank, and that we need to learn much more about what's happening to be able to enrich what we are doing in terms of the bank traditional business lines of lending and analytical work and capacity development with that very rich experience and knowledge that is coming from outside the bank.
So down there, in fact, is a real knowledge exchange going in amongst the finalists, but also with all the other people that have joined in here. Just very briefly, what are some of the ideas that have really struck you?
For me, it's always a real pleasure to come to the development marketplace. I remember I was involved in one of the first one about 9 years ago, and I was also a juror. And I really treasure the idea of spending time with the various people that are bringing ideas into the World Bank. For me, one thing that stands out today is really very often the ideas are really combining a number of interventions. Let me give you an example. I was talking to some participants from Ukraine, and they were sort of combining a benchmarking system to look at weather patterns in some regions of Ukraine with capacity development approach to inform, raise awareness, train, and so forth, but also combined with the press, trying to, and I think it's called rate and shame, basically trying to raise the visibility of what some of the regions are doing, and really show the difference between regions that are doing well and others that are doing less well. So I thought the combination of capacity development, information, knowledge, innovation, all in one package become really a very interesting way to attack some of these issues.
Thank you, Bruno, for coming in and sharing that view and that perspective with people that are connected in different parts of the world. I hope that you, in fact, have been able to get a flavor of the excitement that's been going on there, but also learn some of the content, and hope we can continue the discussion online. Thank you again, Bruno.
My pleasure.
Okay, well, hi again. I'm here now with Ralph Kurtzman, who's the editor of the International Journal of Mushroom Sciences, who's come to Development Marketplace from California. And Dr. Christman, nice to see you here.
Well, thank you.
Mushrooms. Climate change has an impact on all kinds of natural life, as we've seen. What about the mushroom world? What impact is climate change having on mushrooms?
Well, it definitely is having some, particularly in the case of rain, lack of rain, and excessive rain, because they can be drowned out like so many other things, and they definitely need a good supply of moisture to grow.
And there are a variety of mushrooms that can be actually, that are a source of food for animals, for people. When other sources of food may be threatened by climate change, do mushrooms offer an alternative in some cases?
In many cases they do, because we can actually grow them with very little moisture in buildings. And their main requirement is not to be watered, but rather just to have a high humidity, and the building can hold that water.
Tell me, in looking around your development marketplace at the exhibits, the 100 finalists, have you seen any that stick in your mind that stand out as particularly interesting?
Well, I think there are many, but several that stand out are those in the particularly from South America, where they're trying to keep their forests from being burned, and reforestation. And just notice behind me the Bangladesh, where they're growing on floating arrangements without soil, and with their great amount of rain and flooding that they have, this is certainly an interesting prospect.
And have you? Are you? What brought you to Development Marketplace in the first place? Coming all the way from California, it's quite a long trip. What did that?
Well, I'm very much interested in helping people in developed countries. I do work with USAID contractors, and I wondered what other people were proposing, and I have seen some very interesting things, as I say. I'm very interested in seeing that people do have alternative foods when things might disappear for a while. So,
okay, well, thanks very much, Mr. Kurtzman. Bye-bye.
Our water, our land, our people, our greatest resources, all vulnerable to global climate change. Together we must find innovative, practical ways to adapt and balance our needs with those of the planet. The Development Marketplace 2009, 100 Ideas to Save the Planet.